Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this immigration session, and thanks to Yura for organizing it. My name is Ana Garicano. I'm the managing partner at Sagardoy Legal and Expat, a Spanish law firm with 45 people focused on immigration and global mobility field. Our goal today is to share with you the news, the legal news related to immigration in the key jurisdictions, and also to briefly discuss what we do consider two key topics: best practices in immigration and also how IT tools are impacting in our daily practice. For this purpose, we have these four brilliant experts with us. I will allow my colleagues to introduce themselves, but I just want to highlight that we are going to cover, I guess, the key jurisdictions for immigration practitioners, and also that in this panel I represent the different type of providers managing immigration processes. Well, so I will leave the floor to my colleagues to introduce themselves. Would you like to start? Tom, Anastasia? Who goes first?
Okay, I can go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Anastasia Malikova. I am from Inbound Germany team of Fragment office in Frankfurt. And I personally, you could say, I've seen the immigration side of German process from both ends, because I used to be an international student in Germany, and now I'm a German citizen, also working in the field of immigration. I'm really happy and excited to be here today.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. Tom, would you be first?
Hi, everyone. My name's Tom Marsom. I'm a senior associate at Macfarlanes, which is a UK, London-based law firm, and I specialize in UK immigration and nationality issues for both private clients and businesses.
Thank you.
Sarrah.
I'm Sarrah Sammoon. I'm from across the world, from Sri Lanka. I'm co-founder of Magellan Champlain. I started the business, I got into the industry in Washington, D.C. in immigration, and when I moved to Sri Lanka, so the gap in access to expert immigration attorneys, so that's how I started the business. We provide corporate immigration assignments for corporates, investors, and professional skilled workers. I have to add, I'm also passionate about advocating for global citizenship with privilege and gapping the bridge between privileged and less privileged passports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarrah. Audrey, your turn.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Audrey Lustgarten. I'm the managing partner of the global team at WR Immigration, which is a primarily US-based immigration law firm specializing in corporate immigration, visas, work permits, residence permits, document apostille, all that fun stuff. I'm personally in our Michigan office, so nice and cold, although we also have a lot of offices in California, which are lovely. So really happy to be here with you today.
Thank you very much, you all, for the introductions. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty, and we will start with news regarding our jurisdictions. I will start by my own country, Spain, and with the trend. And the trend for the Spanish government is to keep attracting foreign investment and talent. And we guess with this goal, last December, the residency permit and residency visa for international remote workers has been implemented. So now this is a reality in Spain. What this visa and permit really allow to the holders is to work from Spain for foreign companies, clients, or employers, and to have a residency status in the country. This category covers not only employees, but also freelancers. And a very important point is that freelancers are authorized to work up to 20% of their time for Spanish clients, which is a very big benefit. In terms of requisites, apart from the general ones applying in Spain, not having criminal records, fulfilling all the social security and employment requirements, be financially reliable, what for this type of visa and permit means to prove that you have at least twice the minimum salary available for residing in the country. This amount can come from salary, fees, or from other legal sources. The very specific requisites are, first, to be a qualified worker. Okay, no handwork can be undertaken under this category. Second, having been working for the employer abroad or for clients abroad during at least the 3 months prior to the submission of the application. The employer or the clients must prove that have been running a business during at least 1 year. And these are really the key points. As you can see, they are not very demanding, but the issues we are facing are not coming from immigration requirements, but from social security perspective, because social security law has not been adapted to this new immigration category. In terms of process, the process is considered for us as a fast track. We have 2 options. If the digital nomad is out of Spain, he or she can directly apply for the visa in the Spanish consulate having jurisdiction in his or her place of residency. And this is very important because the application does not need to be sponsored by the company, but just by the foreign national. The company, the employer, does not need to get involved. Okay, so once the visa application is submitted through this consular process, statutory processing time would be 10 working days, and the visa will have a validity of 1 year. This is one possibility. A different possibility would be the in-country process. This means that the remote worker comes to Spain as visitor, or perhaps he or she is already in Spain under a student permit, for example, and he or she applies directly in Spain, provided he is not obviously under an illegal status, for the residency permit. The residency permit application will be resolved in 20 working days and will have a validity up to 3 years. The duration will depend on the time authorized from the employer to work from Spain. If we provide authorities with a remote worker letter confirming that our client has been authorized to work during 1 year, the permit will be limited to 1 year. If there is not maximum duration, it will be granted with maximum validity up to 3 years. And it can be extended as much as needed, provided conditions that led to the approval are maintained. Another beneficial point regarding this category are dependents. Dependents can obtain permits and visas linked to the principal with same validity and would be authorized to work. And honestly, that's it from the digital nomad visa perspective. We do consider it is a very beneficial category to attract talent, but as challenge, I will highlight the need of having social security regulations covering this new immigration category. Apart from this new visa, I will highlight in Spain modifications regarding the student permits that now allow directly to work the student, provided he or she is attending a superior education academic program, to work up to 30 hours per week as employee or as a freelancer. This is being very, very beneficial for our clients. And also that the common work and residency permits as freelancer and as employee, the renewed one has now a duration of 4 years. This means that first permit has a validity of 1 year. The renewed one, 4. 1 plus 4, 5. So they can apply directly after 5 years for long-term residency permits. And I guess these are the key modifications from Spain. Perhaps we can continue with Europe, with Germany. Anastasia?
Sure. So in Germany, a new immigration bill, a new bill is going to come into effect at the end of this year, beginning of next year. And in my opinion, it is going to facilitate the process, the German immigration policy and process. I would like to highlight a few features of the new bill that I think are really important and that are going to attract more global talent to Germany. So the first feature I would like to talk about is the blue card residence permit type the minimum salary threshold for this residence permit type is going to be lowered, and that will include both regular blue card applications and blue card applications for shortage occupations. Speaking of shortage occupations, there is a list of those professions, and according to the new law, to the new bill that is hopefully is going to be a law, that list is going to get longer, and it essentially aims to include more categories of people. So the following categories are going to be included, added to the list of shortage occupations. Healthcare workers, childcare workers as well, some teachers, people working in logistics, construction, and mining industry should also be added to that list. Another third important feature of the proposed bill is the minimum eligibility period of time that a foreigner has to, in general cases, has to live in Germany in order to be eligible to apply for a permanent residency. That period of time is going to be shortened from currently 5 years to 3 years in general cases, in general. So that would definitely, that's also one of the incentives, I believe, to attract more international talent to Germany. And finally, this is just one more feature as well. The list is, what I'm going to mention is not everything, but the most important things, I believe, need to be mentioned. IT professionals with relevant work experience will be able to apply in the future for a blue card without having a degree. And just a final thing in the bill is also the German government has realized the need for more efficiency and more digital processes, and that is also in the proposed bill.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. I can see that, as always, the different EU member states keep competing to attract talent and investment. Regarding blue card, I must say we are behind. The new regulation about blue card has not yet been implemented in Spain. Well, Tom, now Brexit. UK.
It's years ago.
Please, illustrate us.
We're still talking about it. Yeah, so in the UK, I mean, I've been interested in hearing about Germany's shortage occupation list, and I imagine the UK shortage occupation list is quite similar, although we want all your engineers to come to the UK, but not attracting too many at the moment. But in the UK, Brexit still looms large over our immigration system. So even though the Brexit vote was in 2016, it took until January 2021 to end the transition period. So this is when new immigration rules and new immigration system came in for the UK. So it's been about 2 years since it bedded in. Of course, the biggest feature in that was the end of freedom of movement. So EA nationals and Swiss nationals didn't have the right to move to the UK without a residence permit. And this has had a sort of enormous knock-on impact on our labour market. And we've seen large numbers of EU nationals exit the UK, or at least leaving the UK during the pandemic and not coming back, which has caused a bit of a labour shortage in the UK, to put it mildly. So one of the interesting features of the Brexit referendum, arguments about sovereignty, etc., but it was largely immigration that people were talking about. So this was a huge opportunity for the government to say, okay, we're going to change our immigration system, we're going to reduce the number of people coming to the UK, but actually the opposite happened. they liberalised the system. They opened it up much wider. So the UK immigration system is still based around sponsorship, so students need universities or colleges to sponsor them, workers need companies to sponsor them, and the number of jobs which is now eligible for sponsorship expanded dramatically. The level before Brexit was about degree level and above. It's now school leaver level and above, and there's an awful lot of interesting jobs on there which are eligible, and a lot of missing jobs. So in particular in retail, in hospitality, and hotels, a lot of the jobs that European nationals did in those industries are not on the list of eligible sponsorship. And there's a move in the government to think, well, maybe there should be. So that's what we're coping with at the moment. Also in the UK, the closure of the investor visa last year, very suddenly, so that was closed by tweet. So the Home Secretary just closed the investor visa whilst Parliament was in recess, and they had actually changed the rules 4 minutes before she tweeted that. So it was just done. So any investors, which is our sort of residence by investment system, who already have visas still could keep them and extend them, but they're going to sunset it, so there's a deadline to apply for extensions, a deadline to apply for indefinite leave to remain if you want to. And that's a trend you see across the world. Lots of countries are closing or have closed their citizenship by investment programs because they're very controversial, but now we're seeing even residence by investment programs are being closed. And the UK had, I mean, it wasn't a particularly big program, only about 400 people applied a year, but it always attracted negative headlines in the press, so the government closed it. They have thought about reintroducing a rebranded version, and there were some draft rules which were published last year, but they changed their minds at the last minute. And what we're hearing is that they're probably not going to introduce the new investor program anytime soon, which is a shame. So what people are doing instead is just setting up companies in the UK and effectively sponsoring themselves to work in the UK. And then other bits and pieces, things like quite recently there's been a relaxation of the nationality rules, so they're making it easier to get British citizenship, particularly for children under 18s who have spent a lot of time in the UK. There was always discretionary applications there, but they've made it clearer now when they will grant citizenship to people who've spent significant amount of time in the UK as minors, and it's a lot more generous than it used to be, which is a very positive development. And then finally, the government is still focused on bringing down numbers because that is what our press, our media wants. And they go for the low-hanging fruit, which is unfortunately dependence. So if people can't bring their families to the UK, then people are less inclined to come to the UK. And this just seems bizarre that we've got this mismatch of we want the best talent to come to the UK, but we don't actually want anyone to come to the UK. And it's very difficult to work that out. So dependents, they're thinking about changing the law there, and students, they're thinking about changing the law, which has caused a big amount of alarm in the university sector. Whether or not any of this happens, I don't know. Probably not before the election, but immigration is quite an easy election issue. We have an election coming up in the next 18 months, so it's going to be high on the agenda.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I fully agree that this trend of cancelling investor residency visas is being quite common now. I was talking with a colleague about Portugal during lunchtime, and I mean, this is going to be an issue because the people invested under the promise that they will receive a permit that will be extended, provided that conditions that led to the approval were maintained. It's not been the case. So I assume there is going to be a big legal fight, right? Yes,
certainly, perhaps in the UK they've been quite generous with the sunsetting, but in other countries not quite. I mean, Ireland, I think, has just closed or is closing their investor program. Portugal, other countries as well. And it's all linked to housing, so because they all cite housing concerns.
It's crazy. Well, Sarrah, your country, your region.
Yes, but I have to tell Tom, I had more inquiries for investor visas to the UK only after they announced the closure.
Yes.
Yes. So first of all, very grateful for Yura and Anna for giving Sri Lanka a platform. So I feel like I need to pitch a little bit about Sri Lanka compared to these famous countries. So I know there are a few of you here who already bring in assignees to Sri Lanka. We're a 22 million population island, but we're very strategically, for those of you who don't know, located at the crossroads of a major shipping route to South Asia, Far East, Europe, and America. And we are home to one of the top 25 container ports in the world. So we are literally a really good gateway to 24.5% of the population. So in terms of news, there are three things I wanted to touch on. One is people may not be aware, to keep in mind, heard that you're first in this industry, is maybe the Colombo Port City that is being constructed by the Chinese. They're the construction, they won the bid to construct. And that is going to be, it's delayed. It's going to be a couple of years down the line when it's ready, but it's already commenced and there are people moving in. And it's going to be a hub for South Asia. And what it's going to do is it's going to be it's being piloted as a special economic zone, and they're going to be the ease of business is going to be quite radical compared to the South Asian region. So that's going to change the geo-economics in the region when that does come up. So we have about 30-odd multinationals, $10 billion up net worth up in Sri Lanka already, but we're seeing companies move in with just one representative into the region, preparing for this move once the port city is up. And it's a $1.4 billion project, but the prices obviously are going up now, and it's a reclaimed land. Yes, a little bit like the Palms Dubai, but more just a financial center. Then like I said, there are a few of you here I see that already send in assignees to Sri Lanka and have gone through the frustration of having to renew the visa every year with the same kind of documentation. The good news is Sri Lanka just a couple of months ago changed that to, on certain categories, very popular categories of assignees coming in to get a 2 to 3 year visa, and for some professionals to get 5 years and 10 years, which is never heard of in our region generally. So that's like a huge benefit that is coming in order to move in. The other thing is, because you touched on the digital nomads, and we always see Sri Lanka come up as a popular point for digital nomads, and even on some websites saying we have a digital nomad visa, because even our government did declare that we have one, but we don't, right? So we have what we'd say, it was it was going to be implemented, but we know with COVID and things and change of government, it didn't happen. So what we have is a tourist visa, which they're giving for 237 days, which for most corporates that still actually we get inquiries all the time for people trying to move in on the digital nomad visa. It is a compliance issue, right? So the alternative is one of the longer term visas, which will depend on the certain characteristics of the assignees, right? Or them having to set up a company in Sri Lanka. Yeah, so those are the 3 updates I have.
Thank you very much. At least we have some good news from your region. Well, Audrey, your turn.
Yes.
You manage a lot of jurisdictions, but you're going to focus on
Yes, we cover almost 100, but we don't want to be here all day, so I'm going to focus very quickly just on the U.S. and Canada, which are the subject of the vast majority of our cases, I would say. Unfortunately, not all good news in our jurisdictions. Actually, some significant not so good news to share. In the U.S., the big news recently is something called the H-1B cap. The H-1B is our primary type of skilled worker visa, and unfortunately, our government has limited to only 65,000 of these visas are available each year. In prior years, hasn't necessarily been a problem every single year, but certainly this year there's just a crazy surge in demand. The final numbers are not in, but we believe over 500,000 people applied for the 65,000 slots, which is obviously a huge issue for our corporate clients, not being able to get the talent that they need into the U.S. One of my partners and I did a webinar recently on alternatives to the H-1B, trying to look at creative strategies, other visa types in the U.S. That people might be able to take advantage of if you're not fortunate enough to win the lottery and get one of those coveted slots. Of course, my answer to this is always send them to Canada. We'll take them. But that is a really big problem in U.S. immigration, and unfortunately don't really see it changing anytime soon. Another not so good news is that we do anticipate more retrogression in the green card process. I won't get into all of the details, but basically this is increasing the wait time, how long people have to wait in order to get a green card if they are from certain countries that have caps on the number of people that can come in. We actually have Charlie Oppenheim, who was with the U.S. Department of State for over 40 years, recently joined our firm as a director of visa consulting, and so he helps with these projections and it's not great news, but it's great to be able to have someone giving that kind of forecast with his little crystal ball. But one bit of good news in the U.S. is that it looks like something called visa revalidation is coming back. And what that is the ability to get a new visa stamped while you are in the United States in certain categories. So as it stands, and as it has been for quite some time, people will have to go out of the U.S. to visit a U.S. consulate to get a new visa stamp in their passport. This can be really inconvenient, particularly with COVID-induced backlogs in visa processing. So now it looks like there will be a pathway once again for them to get that stamp without leaving the U.S. and without having to be away from their jobs and their families and all of that. Flipping very quickly to Canada, unfortunately a little bit more bad news. I was very excited that I was, a couple of weeks ago planning to come here, planning my updates, and the news I was going to share is that a lot of the COVID-related backlogs are starting to be cleared. At one point the Canadian consulates in India were having, 45 weeks processing time to get a visa stamp. That was down to maybe 8 or 9 weeks. And then last week, the government decided to go on strike. So everything's kind of on hold. I mean, essential services are allegedly still being performed, but we do anticipate that will take, a little bit of the momentum out of the backlog clearing that they were accomplishing before that happened.
I was going to say that in the UK, the passport office just cleared their backlog, and then they went on strike.
Yes. What is it? They're like, oh, we accomplished the goal. Let's take a break. How long did it last? Are you still
The strike
going?
is still ongoing, yeah.
Still ongoing.
Yeah, I also flew here from the U.S. via Canada, so I was like, oh no, in a personal capacity, why did I book through Canada? But it was fine. The customs and border folks were not on strike. But ending with one small positive note, the government of Canada did just recently announce additional extensions of the postgraduate work permit. So that is for folks who have gone to school in Canada. They can get a postgraduate work permit, and the government just made it possible for them to extend that by an additional 18 months. So that buys students a bit more time to look for work, or employers more time before they have to go through the trouble of applying for, an employer-sponsored work permit. So that was a little bit of good news there to close us out.
It's
Anna.
not that bad. Sorry for United States practitioners. Well, thank you very much for these updates. Now let's move to our first hot topic, best practices. Would you like to start, Audrey, with best practices in global immigration management?
I would.
Please.
Thank you, Anna. So this is, as funny as it might sound, a topic that I'm definitely passionate about. In my role, I get to see kind of both sides of best practices, so to speak. So I get to be on the side of providing direct services to clients, and also on the side of managing our many vendors in various countries around the world. So I'm going to split my brief talk here into those two categories. What are the best practices that vendors providing immigration services direct clients should observe, and then what are some best practices for those of us who manage vendors around the world, because I think those two overlap, but they are somewhat distinct. And I want to start off by saying I'm providing these best practices from an American/Canadian viewpoint. And one thing I think Eura has done a great job of is just like cultural awareness and competence and training. And that's something that I've already enjoyed hearing about here. So I want to be very mindful that this is the perspective that I am coming at this from, but hopefully still relevant for those of you who are in other jurisdictions but might have American or Canadian clients. So best practices in terms of direct client service, the piece of generic advice I always give folks who are, I'm training or they're new to the field, is to put yourself in the client's shoes. To imagine that you're going through the process from their perspective, potentially for the very first time, and think, what would I want to experience? How would I understand this process based on what I am being provided with here? Or, likewise in the HR shoes, what could I do to make the HR's life easier as they go through what can sometimes, particularly in the US, be a painful immigration process? And I think that we have to, when putting ourselves in the shoes of the HR or of, the assignee, the foreign national, we have to take into consideration, perspectives they might be gaining from other areas of their life. And I heard a really good speech a few months ago, and so I borrow a little bit from it. Now, people are so used to placing an order for an Amazon package, and you get an instant confirmation, and you get a tracking number, and you know exactly when you're going to receive the item, and every step of the way what's going to happen. Even now ordering a pizza, delivered to your house. Some restaurants have it where you can, watch the driver on an interactive map proceeding to your house. And so people come to us with these expectations that may have been set by other services they are engaging with in their lives. And we know as practitioners that, what we do is, sorry to say, but more difficult than making a pizza or delivering a box. We have to interact significantly with governments, which we don't control. And so, we have our work cut out for us. But I think at least going in, understanding that this is the expectation that many of our clients have, it can help us to make the best of the situation that we're facing. So it can help us, remember that we want to be really transparent with clients. We need to explain the process. We can't necessarily make it all better. Your visa is not going to proceed in the next 36 minutes to your house, but at least being upfront with them about that. Providing strategic advice, acknowledging that we can't always achieve all of their goals, but what are the strategic options? Giving them a menu to choose from can go a long way to making them feel more empowered in a difficult situation. Providing them with a process overview or a process map so they know all the steps. Again, it's not going to proceed as quickly as an Amazon package, but at least you know the steps and you know the anticipated timing. And then being really comprehensive when we provide them with a questionnaire or a list of documents. What are all the things that you're going to need? Really thinking ahead and thinking through all the steps and being upfront with them about that so that they know what to expect and their expectations are set accordingly. Sometimes it can help to really highlight this approach by giving talking a little bit about the opposite approach to this, which would be more of the stream of consciousness approach, or I've heard some people refer to it as the breadcrumbs approach. You leave a breadcrumb trail that the clients have to try to follow and see what direction they're going to go. Not to pick on one country, I think this could happen anywhere, but I once had they're not here, it was probably 9 years ago, a Malaysian local advisor that, we were trying to file an application, and when I got to work in the morning, I had 8 separate emails from the gentleman as he went through the package, realizing each thing he had forgotten to ask for or would need in order to make the filing. So don't do that. Even if you've, realize you've forgotten something, make it all the way through the package. Let it sit for a few minutes, get a coffee, come back, make sure, okay, now I have everything that I need to request. You can apologize once, request all the missing items, that we don't expect you to be perfect, but to be thoughtful and to be mindful can go a really long way to giving a positive experience. And you don't need we're very fortunate at WR, we have a great technology system that we've built, but I hear from some people worried they don't have the latest app for this. They don't have that package tracking app for the immigration service. That's okay. You can use the tools that you have at your disposal as long as you're doing so mindfully and over-communicating to the client and really making sure to view things from their perspective. I'm mindful that I don't want to take too much time, Anna, but just, flipping very quickly to, best practices for managing immigration vendors. I mean, some of the same things are very important. Communication, I would say, if you're managing vendors, you really need to have a process. I call it smart standardization, process for onboarding them, communicate with them. What are you looking for? What do you expect from them? What are the requirements to work with you? Have it in an easy to reference format that they can look back at if they forget 3 weeks from now what it was supposed to be. We have recorded trainings. So if we have vendors, we do a live training, but then we also record it. So if they have new hires, they can go back and they can look at that. And, obviously they can always reach out if they need clarification, but this is also reducing how much work has to go into managing your vendors. Because when you have over 100 of them, it can get to be a bit much. And then having cultural and emotional intelligence is really important. Realizing that the way that they work might be very different from your way and not taking it for granted. We are really big on diversity and inclusion, and so we like to work with a lot of small partners and diverse partners, and they may have a different perspective. And so it's really important to have that two-way communication and to make them feel comfortable with you. I can't overemphasize this, particularly when you get into a difficult situation, maybe a compliance-related situation where something has gone wrong. It's so important that your vendor feels that they can come to you with that and not try to hide it, not try to sweep it out under the rug, but be very transparent and come to you and feel that there's a partnership there. It's not that, we're going to accuse you, we're going to fire you. Let's work together to try to solve this problem as best we can in the client's interest. So being that an ally, not an adversary, you're all part of the same team. And the last thing I will say is, really develop and nurture those genuine relationships with your vendors. I'm very fortunate. We sometimes jokingly call it our immigration family, the group of people that I work with day in and day out, and really having those genuine relationships goes so far to make them want to work with you, you want to work with them, and you have a bit of fun while you're doing it and while you're dealing with government backlogs and other things that are not so much fun.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Very useful tips. I guess we need to remind communication, very important, expectations, mainly clients, but also vendors and providers' expectations, and trust, relationships based on trust. Well, Sarrah, speaking from an South Asian perspective, what is the big challenge in your jurisdiction, how it is impacting talent mobility, and what are the best practices you do recommend?
Thank you.
Please.
You talked about immigration family that comes up. We talk about immigration gladiators from our perspective, right? Yeah.
Army.
So, yeah. So
army.
one of the challenges that we've really faced, and especially with the current situation where there's already existing delays getting biometrics done and processing times and then waiting times and passports being kept, is that HR, when they are recruiting talent, specifically jobs that require people to travel, some who are doing projects who are designed to go across, to travel to these first world countries, right? So I'm talking from a perspective of South Asia and also globally from passports that are ranked low on their passport index, right? So HR, it's almost a lack of recognition that this ranking of a passport of an assignee or talent is not recognized when hiring, with the complications that may come up if they require travel. So for those of you who may not know about what the passport index is, there are several passport indexes. Henley and Partners has one, Arden Capital has one, but it's what the privileged passports, what we call, that have visa-free access to about 180 odd destinations, are higher ranking. And then there are passports up to 100. Sri Lanka is at 99. Okay, so we can travel to like 40 odd countries visa-free. India is at 82, like Nigeria is 96, right? So when HR comes to us and gives us a job, and we turn around and the assignee is from one of these low-ranked passport countries. There is a checklist that VFS gives, or the embassy gives, but then here we are asking like your entire family immigration history. We're asking for the entire travel history since birth. Right? We're asking for property deed valuations. HR gets annoyed with us, our partners get annoyed with us, our clients get frustrated, but we know that there are things that do come up from experience that once once processing may leave you just 2 days to make the visit or even make the move, and your visa is refused if those are not addressed, right? So that's a huge challenge that we see that you need to recognize when hiring if they do require travel, or obviously, traveling overseas on an assignment, the immigration history has to be taken into account at the very beginning. So that's one of the recommendations I want to make. The other one is the due diligence, what we call at Magellan Champlain, the immigration due diligence profile. We've almost got so popular that we get cases which are refused. It was never with us in the first place, but they come to us afterwards, right? But is that if these lower rank passport assignee who own these passports, that HR should prepare the immigration due diligence profile early on and keep it, because it saves you about 4 to 6 weeks of processing time, right? Because gathering valuations and sometimes gathering police clearances, it takes time. So having that in play and their travel history, some of them own about 6 passports, and going through a travel history, it's unlike the US, which now it's the history is there on the I-94, but going through passport stamps is very tedious. And having to explain that this is important, because we've seen instances when things have come up. They don't even remember that their visa was refused to the UK when they were 14 years old. But it's in the record, right? And some other information was provided. So yeah. So that's the best practice. Number 2 is having an immigration due diligence profile up and ready in their files, so that when travel is required, that it is already there. And the third one that we've been doing lately, because of the huge delays in getting appointments through process visas, is telling them to get the major countries like USA, UK, New Zealand, Australian visas ahead of time, even if they don't need to travel, and just keeping it, because most of them do give multiple entry visas. And when you have those major country visas, there's a lot of other countries that you can travel to visa-free. So yeah, that's my third recommendation.
Oh, thank you very much. I was not honestly very familiar with the passport index matter, but it is something to be taken into consideration when managing.
I just wanted to also, because one particular assignee just recently, he was hired because of his talent to do a whole project for over 1.5 years, and then he had to go to the UK to onboard. But what he failed to tell HR was that he overstayed as a student. Right, so it's a bit too late at the end.
You were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. He can't do his job that he was hired to do.
Exactly, yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Before going to our second topic, the IT impact on immigration processes, I have a question for you, Audrey. Okay? And it is about what we are noticing, at least in our practice in Spain, in terms of clients' expectations. They are requesting more and more, and they do expect that our lawyers or advisors not advise only about immigration, but also about all the legal aspects, at least key legal aspects linked to the international mobility process. Like if we explain a specific visa category, they really expect that the lawyer or consultant can advise about social security regulation and tax status. And I really would like to check with you if you are facing same challenges, because for us it was a key point to grow, and we had to recruit tax lawyer, employment, social security lawyers. At some point, we started and we maintained an alliance with a real company, an in-house partner, to provide the full service. Do you think there is a trend worldwide, or something perhaps more specific for some countries?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that you're right, Anna. That's something that we're seeing as well in our practice in the US and elsewhere. And it's really challenging, because what the client really wants is like one single person that knows every single aspect: immigration, tax, employment, relocation, how to get their pet into the country, like everything anyone could ever need. They want one person to know it, and that one person should be available at 24 hours a day. So this is obviously an expectation that we can't meet, but I think you are spot on with regard to how to address that. It's like we are immigration experts, but having the right colleagues at the firm and having the right partners and having the right vendors so that at least the client feels like they do have a one-stop shop to come and find where can they find assistance, even if it can't unfortunately be the same single person with all of this knowledge. But it's definitely a
We
big
notice
trend.
they really value to have a single point of contact,
Yes.
even as coordinator, but they don't want to talk to 10 different people, and this is definitely a challenge. Well, if you don't have further comments on that, let's go to the second topic.
Sorry, Anna, can I just
Please,
add on that? Yeah,
please.
because we see that now much more since COVID as well. I don't know what the pattern is over there, but like even with Canada, the ICT transfers, right? So our attorneys handle the immigration part, then they get there, and then there's, like $3,000 of tax that they pay a month, and they're like, you need to bring us, and we're like, well, that is not our job. But now we've having to change that. Even with Portugal, we're rushing to getting all the last-minute applications with the housing thing, right? But global tax is a huge issue.
Yeah.
So we find that, totally agree that
Yeah.
we are having to give a more holistic
apparently,
approach.
The holistic approach is going to be a must, apparently. Well, let's move to the increase of IT tools in immigration process. Tom, would you like to illustrate us?
Sure. So I'm going to use the UK as an example. Just talking about the increasing use of digital tools. So that's not just like online forms or online portals, but also apps as well, mobile phone apps. And these are having sort of pros and cons. And the UK has, actually the government's done a really good job of introducing a lot more of these tools recently. And it's made the process a lot faster. For many people. I mean, just a way as an example, 15 years ago, most forms were paper forms. The internet was around then, but still paper forms. You send in your original documents, you went to in-person appointments, you received a piece of cardboard back, which confirmed your status or something stamped into your passport. 10 years ago, they introduced biometric residence permits, so the little cards which have your details on. But then 5 years ago, online forms started appearing everywhere. They started using copy documents instead, so we didn't have to send in original documents. You still had the in-person appointments and you still received a BRP. But more recently, the UK government has gone more digital for many, many categories. So we don't have to send in any documents. You don't have to attend in-person appointments. You confirm your identity over an app which scans your passport because your biometrics are already in your biometric passports. They just lift those out. It's all very clever. This was done en masse via the EU settlement scheme to register EEA nationals who wanted to stay in the UK post-Brexit. And they've rolled that out to lots and lots of different visa categories. So the UK is at the forefront of that in many respects. There are other countries which are doing it a lot better, and there are other countries which are not doing it at all. Come on to Germany in a second. The pros are, the pros, of course, it's quicker, it's easier, there are a lot of automated checks, there's no more lost documents, there are fewer mistakes made during applications, it's sustainable because you're not printing BRPs anymore or producing vast amounts of paper as we used to have to do. But on the negative side, it's not, the system is quite new. It's not quite trusted by all employers, or in particular landlords we find as well. They don't like, for their right to rent checks in particular, some landlords are quite confused by this, even large institutional landlords. Even other government agencies in the UK don't seem to trust their own Home Office system. I think that's typical across the world, and then not to mention other countries. It also, of course, relies on the tech reliability, so that, nothing goes wrong on the back end. That's a disaster waiting to happen, but we have to, it's the only system we've got. And then finally on record keeping, especially fast forwarding, say 10 years, if people want to look back and say, well, what is your immigration history? Before they could produce physical visas and stamps, or sometimes if they kept their BRPs or have copies of them, they can show one after the other and they can prove their time. A lot of these digital systems don't have any history on them whatsoever, hardly any dates. So we really encourage UK migrants to keep their own records, make sure they're taking screenshots of systems, because they do change all of a sudden without any warning. So that's something which might be a problem in the future. I'm just looking at other examples in other countries. We find that Singapore, for example, has a fantastic hybrid system where you do get a little card and it's got a little QR code on it, and you download the app, and then that goes to the online system. And then that online, so you keep the card and that just sort of stays the same, but the online system changes from time to time as you update your immigration status. We found that's a fantastic system. So, Singapore, as usual, doing things right. But I'm wondering what because you mentioned in that the German government is planning to, introduce the internet to
well,
to
not the
system,
internet,
or
but
the digital systems.
Yeah, definitely to more digitize the immigration process. And when it comes to the use of technology in immigration in Germany, I see that as a spectrum. So on one hand, on one end of the spectrum, we have the upcoming changes in the process efficiency and digitalization planned by the government through this new bill. Yeah, that is going to be great. And we're all looking forward to implementing and working with those changes, because it is going to make the lives of everyone involved in the immigration process in Germany easier. So there is, for example, a pilot digital visa process in some locations already at German missions abroad. Yeah, but that is piloting at the moment. Should become a norm, a standard later on, hopefully. And then in the middle, let's say, of the spectrum, we have, for example, the Federal Employment Agency that recently started sharing internally with German missions abroad copies of the work permit, so that we as practitioners right now do not need to send a UPS package with the original document to the assignee, so that the person takes that original to the visa interview. Now, German embassies worldwide should be able to, are able to access that document through their internal system. And then, let's say, from my experience, on the other end of the spectrum, there are some immigration offices in the country which, for example, for one reason or the other, I don't know why, but they do not accept pictures or converted picture files into PDFs. Like, they literally are asking for a scanned document per scanner machine, like a real scanner. They do not accept nothing else. And yeah, even when you submit documents in this manner, they come back to you and tell you, well, please scan. Yeah, so it's, to me, it seems there is definitely a technological gap between immigration service providers and the technology that is being used, and the technology on the government side. And this is the challenge we have to deal with in everyday work, and hopefully through immigration bill and further work between governments and immigration providers, this gap will close soon and fast. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And can I add something to
Sure.
Tom on the UK? So all the technology advances, but UK VFS has nailed the revenue model. So as you go onto the website, we can choose an amazing package. For coffee, this much. For premier lunch, this much. Bring your documents, we'll scan you this much.
Yeah.
Express delivery, so we end up paying about like 500,
Yeah.
600 pounds more.
So,
Wasted.
yeah, well, that's not the UK government. That's, of
It's a
course,
VFS,
the
yeah.
third-party commercial providers who have been ennobled by the UK government to do this. Yeah, UK immigration is very fast. It's very certain. So, if you meet the requirements, you get the visa. These are the big pluses about the UK.
Yeah.
It is extremely expensive. And yes, there are lots of added-on services which you don't need, but they will try and sell you anyway.
This is not the case for Spain. Our fast-track government fee is less than 80 euro,
Yeah.
and for biometrics is around 20 euro.
Yeah.
You got to learn from the UK.
The blue card government fee is much higher, but we expect this is going to be modified once implemented the new U-card EU directive.
Well, I mean, worldwide again, like the trend is that, I mean, not just visas and biometric residence cards and things like that, but also passports themselves will become digital probably in the next, start being introduced in the next 10 to 15 years, which is both sort of exciting but also terrifying as well in that, you know, if you're running out of battery as you approach the border, it's, you know, which can happen. It's that's going to be. It's nice to have a physical document, but the trend is against this.
And the other issue is when things go wrong. You know, more and more governments are cutting off access to human beings, and it's like the online systems are great when they work or when you have battery or whatever it may be, but when something goes wrong, I find it's incredibly difficult to reach a human being to try to remedy that.
Well, I mean, I imagine the border will be sort of an AI chatbot at some point.
Hopefully not gone wrong.
A couple of years ago, the immigration office in Madrid suffered a cyber attack, and it was a nightmare. July was completely wasted. They couldn't process applications. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare until they recovered. Well, I'm afraid we are running out of time. Just for conclusions, how immigration rules are impacting on talent mobility, and any additional tip to make our clients' life easier? Would you like to start, Anastasia?
Sure. Well, Germany is a very attractive country for international talent, and I really hope that the improvements that are about to come into effect are just going to keep the country's position and attractiveness for international talent and just make it even stronger. So come to Germany.
Great.
I have to advocate for my own country now. So
your time. Shall we go to the UK?
I mean, the thing about the UK is that you have to separate the headlines from reality, and by headlines I mean literal headlines in the press, because you know what you read on the front page of the news in the UK, just which is often what the government wants people to think is not actually what they're doing, which I know is common elsewhere, but it's pretty acute in the UK, where they announce so many policies, but very few of these policies see the light of day. So at the moment, the UK immigration system, I say it's fast, it's certain, it's very liberal at the moment. So we consider this a bit of a golden age if you want to come to the UK and set up companies and bring skilled workers over, but be prepared for the cost. And also it might change in the future, but you know, that's, it should be very well signposted.
Well, because they pitched the countries, I wasn't going to talk, but you know, Sri Lanka has amazing climate weather and by the beaches, and we've got whales and gemstones. But on the other hand, a point I'd like to say is holistically plan ahead by having as many visas and approvals as you can ahead of time to travel on your passport.
And I would say just be creative and be flexible, you know, with things constantly changing and challenges popping up and, you know, strikes and running out of visas and all of that. You have to be ready to pivot and, you know, explore alternative options.
Okay. Well, from my side, holistic approach to the international mobility process to take care not only of immigration, but all the legal aspects linked to immigration and for sure relocation, because this is a key point for families. Well, I guess we have finished.